Hello and welcome to Nzone Focus. I'm Allan Lee. Our programme tonight features two people who found themselves at the centre of the biggest news story of the year 2 years ago, when their daughter Natasha was killed in the Mangetepopo Gorge canyoning disaster. It was a tragedy which would test any marriage to breaking point. Andy and Nikki Bray, perhaps best known to most of us as the directors of the marriage counselling service Family Life, are no strangers, though, to difficult times. Andy's written their story in a new book called Treasures in the Darkness, and they join me now. Thank you both very much for coming in. It's a very honest book. I mean, before I talk to Andy about some of his stuff, it's when you read someone's innermost thoughts, and he shares, you know, how he really feels about things. Was it what you expected?
Yes, because I think the thing that I've always admired about Andy is he's always quite a vulnerable person. He's always very transparent. And so for him to share his heart in the book is a part of who he is always anyway. So, yeah, it was what I was expected. The raw emotion and the truthfulness and the transparency was, yeah, it's just him.
Andy, it is a very honest book. Was it hard to find that and hard to share that sort of stuff?
Oh, I don't even know why the book came about in the first place. It's only because so many people have been nagging me for so many years to write your story, put your story down. And I think one of the motivating factors early on was I wanted to, you know, you live your life out with your children all around you, but they never really know your story. And particularly Natasha, and as she was growing up, I wanted to know some of the lessons I'd learned in life and some of the hardships I'd been through, and what made us the family that we are today, why we believe so deeply about some of the beliefs we have. And so I wanted to pass them on more for our children's sake than anybody. And I was looking at maybe doing 5 copies so that, you know, each of my kids could have one and Mum could have one. So the fact that we've sold about 5,000 books is astonishing to me, and I'm just thrilled that people have got something out of it, that they've been encouraged by it.
Let's start at the beginning. When you were a teenager, you were pretty rumbustious. Is that a good word?
Rumbustious, yeah. I don't know what that word means, but I was an outdoors kind of guy. Yeah. I was a sporty guy. I was a strong man. I felt invincible. I felt like I could take on the world, and so I think every young person has that sense of invincibility about them, especially young men, and like nothing will touch us, and we love to challenge. And so that was part of my makeup from an early age, I guess. Before I even began to face difficulties, I would take on pretty big challenges.
Because you're a Queen Scout?
I was. I was, yeah, probably the first Queen Scout in Pakuranga, which made me feel very proud. And yeah, just a person that loved to strive for big goals.
And then you went on that trip to the Southern Alps. Just tell us what happened.
Yeah, I mean, my team had already gone ahead of me. I'd organised this trip, as I was a bit of an organiser, and it was a minibus of people going away skiing for a 2-week holiday. Fantastic. And yet I caught this sore throat, which laid me up in bed. And I didn't really want anything to stop me. So as soon as the doctor gave me the opportunity that maybe I'll be all right, I got on the next plane and flew down to join them. They were already halfway on their trip. And so I had any excuse to leave my hospital bed and join these guys on the ski trip. Unfortunately, you know, that illness didn't get better by me being active. I probably should have had a week off and been fully recovered, but I think throwing myself not only into a holiday, but a skiing holiday around some of the best slopes of New Zealand just wore my body down, and I had a massive problem with renal failure as my kidneys packed up due to this infection. And maybe if we'd had a blood test back in those days, you probably didn't have as many tests as you do now, and we would have picked it up earlier. But yeah, I probably pushed my body to the limits during that trip.
You ended up on dialysis.
I did, and even that was it didn't happen straight away. It was a slow decline. I don't think I even realised back then how sick I really was, and it was to be a wake-up call when suddenly I was confronted with this kidney machine that I needed to keep me alive. But even then, I'd become so unwell that this was like a saviour to me, that was going to keep me alive and keep me well. And while the first dialysis session was absolutely terrible, I did begin to feel well again, which was, you know, a little light at the end of the tunnel for me back then.
And you had a fiancée and then your wife, Pam. It was very tough on her.
That was really hard. I met I married my childhood sweetheart, and everybody felt that we were just right for each other. We were on this roller coaster ride towards marriage. We did get married, and there's all the presents and the whole thing of setting up home, and then dialysis. And so we kind of coexisted in this relationship while I dialysed at night. And I don't think we ever confronted the seriousness of my situation and my health. We'd both been outdoors people, and now she was married to this kidney patient, and it kind of wasn't the life that we had anticipated, but we never faced up to it. We never talked about it, or we just kind of coped with it without it, and it just kind of was in the background, even though it was an integral part of our life. I don't think, like as Nikki and I would do now, we would talk about what's coming up and talk about how we need to adjust, or how we need to behave towards this new situation, this new crisis. We have a much better way of dealing with things than I ever had back then. And so I think in our naivety, we just kind of put up with it. Yeah. But it was never dealt with. And one night, she just sat up in bed and said, "I don't want to be married to you anymore."
Yeah, she says, makes tears spring to your eyes. She said, "I love you like a brother, but not like a husband."
That hurts. Those words hurt, because I did love her as a woman, and we're still good friends. She now lives in Germany, still unmarried, but she's a great girl, and she was going through her own issues, like her mother had just died, and it was an issue we never talked about. It was just something that happened, and in fact, it's kind of neat that I think just 2 years ago, Pam and I had this conversation over the phone here in Germany, me in New Zealand, as we talked about all those years ago and what was really going on, and we kind of forgave each other in our own way as we realised some maturity later really helped give greater understanding of that time back then. But yes, it did hurt. It took me 2 years to really even talk to another woman, let alone even think about, going out with somebody and getting married again.
Which brings us very neatly to the next section, but we'll take a break and then we'll talk some more. Join us again in a couple of minutes.